A move by one driver on pit road caused a fight between two crews. The question is, was it intentional? Meanwhile, Ty Dillon's having the time of his life in the Cup Series, and SVG continues to dominate, making history at Sonoma. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, it's Taylor Kitchen and welcome back to Above the Yellow Line. I mean, what more can I say at this point for Shane Van Gisbergen? Gets his third win of the season, the first driver since Jeff Gordon in 1998 to 1999 to win 3 road course races in a row from the pole. Dude is absolutely insane. SVG is now a 3-time winner this season. All of them, of course, in a row, just like Christopher Bell did earlier this year. And he's ranked 3rd in the playoff standings. Let's take a second to think about that, because that's insane. For Shane Van Gisbergen, we know that he's stellar at the road courses. We know, though, that he's still lacking in the oval department, and he addressed this post-race. He was compared to the same likes of Jeff Gordon with that stat I just shared earlier. And he was like, man, I mean, to be compared in the same breath as Jeff Gordon is unreal, but I'm not an idiot. He was like, I know there's no comparison when it comes to ovals, and he needs to get better at the ovals to start proving people wrong. He's in the playoffs, locked in, 3rd ranked in the playoff standings right now, but if he wants to make it past the first round in the playoffs, which is all oval tracks, he needs to get better during these last few races of the regular season, and he is very, very aware of that. But his talent is undeniable. His technique is flawless. This was such a good race for Shane Van Gisbergen, and quite honestly, it was so funny to hear the comparisons that other drivers were making. Chase Briscoe, who finished in the 2nd position, was like, this must be what it would be like to compete against Michael Jordan in his prime playing basketball, just now in race cars. It was a funny comparison, but everyone just had nothing for SVG. He was on a different playing field this race, and even too, SVG had the same issues earlier in the race that everyone else did. Ill handling cars due to just a lack of rear grip. These tires were a big story during this race, but SVG, 3rd win of the season. Congrats to him and that team. Finally, the Red Bull car in victory lane. That is so cool. Looking at the rest of our results, like I said, Chase Briscoe finishing in the 2nd position. Sonoma is not a good track for him by any means, but you put him in Joe Gibbs Racing equipment and you see what he can do. Obviously was the best showing for him at Sonoma. He was honestly quite surprised with it. But of course, happy with the result. In the 3rd position, Chase Elliott, he rocketed to that 3rd spot, just really managed his tires super well during this race, had a great car, finished in that 3rd spot. 4th, Michael McDowell. 5th, Christopher Bell. 6th, Tyler Reddick. 7th, Ty Gibbs. We'll talk about him a little bit more later. 8th, William Byron. 9th, Joey Logano. And 10th, Kyle Busch. And as we look at our point standings after the Sonoma race, the battle is still between Bubba Wallace and Ryan Preece for that last spot in the playoffs. There are only 3 points that separate them in that cutoff line. Wallace +3, Preece -3. Everyone else around them is plus or minus 30-ish points or more to the bad or to the good for that spot. So I'd say there's maybe some more, I guess, playing around with the points that could be had in these next few races. If maybe a driver that is right above or below those two really has a bad day. But ultimately, it's going to be between those 2 drivers of Bubba Wallace and Ryan Preece for that final spot, unless there's a new winner that's not already in the picture. And we know with Daytona a few weeks away, towards the end of August, chaos could be had. So we will have to see. But let's move on from our results and our point situation over to the in-season tournament, because my God. My GridRival move of the day has to go to Ty Dillon, an absolute menace these past few weeks. He has loved the spotlight. He has loved saying, you know what, I beat your favorite driver. He has really taken this in-season tournament by the horns and has run with it. He seems to be having the most fun he's had in his Cup Series career during these past few weeks. And Ty Dillon bumped Alex Bowman out of the way to finish ahead of him to move on to the Final 4 in the in-season challenge. Absolutely insane. 100% my move of the day. I love this era of Ty Dillon. I honestly want him to win the whole thing. I know he's going to have to go against John Hunter Nemechek at Dover next week. It's going to be a tough battle, but just for the fun of it, because it's a good feel-good story. I want Ty Dillon to win the entire thing, the $1 million. I want this to happen so bad. So we'll see, but he has to go against John Hunter Nemechek. The other battle in the Final Four that we're looking at is Tyler Reddick versus Ty Gibbs. That's going to be a very interesting battle to watch, too, to figure out who's going to move on to the final battle before we claim the $1 million for one driver at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So we have points, results, and in-season tournaments to talk about, but I feel like the biggest story of the day wasn't even on track. It was actually on pit road when a fight broke out between the 6 crew and the 54 crew, as reported first by Wendy Venturini on PRN. Now, there were several interpretations as to what actually went down on pit road between the two neighboring stalls, but let's talk about what we saw and then what comments were made post-race. When the two drivers went to pit road around lap 51, Ty Gibbs drove way deep into the pit stall of the number 6 to get to his pit stall, actually clipping the tire that the number 6 tire carrier Tevin McClurkin was carrying. Tevin said to Danielle Trotta that it actually twisted his wrist in the process, so definitely had to hurt there. After the stop was done for both crews, you saw Tevin going to the pit crew of the 54 team to show his displeasure, and in turn, we had some words exchanged, some shoves exchanged. NASCAR got involved in this, but leading into this altercation on pit road was the move by Ty Gibbs to get into his pit stall, and there were two conclusions drawn from that move. One was from Steve Letarte, who was very quick to assume that this was an intentional move by Ty Gibbs. He explained that earlier in the race, Chris Buescher got into the back of Ty Gibbs, spun him, and then when he got to pit road, you know what? Maybe Ty thought that that was actually Brad Keselowski and tried to show his displeasure, but to the pit crew of Brad Keselowski. So a misunderstanding there, and also just showing displeasure towards what he thought was the driver that spun him earlier in the race. Again, Steve Letarte very quick to jump onto the fact that it could have been intentional. Others online started jumping to that conclusion as well, showing comparisons in the pit stops about how Ty Gibbs entered his pit stall earlier in the race versus during that pit stop, angling his car in a little differently. Option 2 is that the pit stop actually seemed normal, all things considered, which is the idea that Steve Letarte corrected himself to later in the broadcast after seeing the overhead view of the pit stop, saying that, Ty Gibbs followed the rules, that he has the right-of-way as the car, the pit crew does not have the right-of-way, and everything looked pretty normal. Post-race, Marty Snyder interviewed Ty Gibbs, asking him about this, and Ty Gibbs was like, yeah, I followed NASCAR rules on how I should enter my pit box. He pointed out to the lines in the pit stalls about where he entered, and just said, I have the right-of-way. Ty Gibbs isn't wrong. According to the NASCAR rulebook, he did exactly what he needed to do, and that's that. On top of that, NASCAR said that Ty Gibbs didn't do anything wrong. So altogether, one, hate that we jumped to conclusions to make it seem like it was an intentional thing. I know Ty Gibbs has been involved in on-track skirmishes before. I understand that, but I don't like that we try to piece 2 and 2 together, or 2 and 3, or whatever it was together, to make it seem like this was intentional before we had any additional information from the driver themselves. I even went back and listened to the in-car radio for Ty Gibbs during that pit stop. Nothing was said. I went back and listened to the in-car radio during the spin. Nothing was said there really either. So again, just be careful about when we're piecing things together. But at the end of the day, NASCAR said nothing was wrong there. Ty Gibbs himself said just follow the rules. But I do understand the frustration of the 6 crew. They were getting ready for that pit stop. They kind of maybe pushed the limits of where they could have been standing on pit road, with knowing an oncoming car was going to be kind of moving into their pit box to get to that car's pit box. But I don't think really anyone's at fault here. It was just a really weird circumstance, and obviously, again, understand the frustration from that 6 crew who was ready to service their car when this took place. I do also hope that Tevin is okay. His wrist was all right. But if anything else comes from this, we'll keep you updated right here on Above the Yellow Line. That said, it's time to move on to our race rating above or below the yellow line. Sonoma. I have a love-hate relationship with this track in the sense that I think the track is gorgeous, but I'm not really a fan of the racing. I think if you look back like early 2000s Sonoma, It was a banger. Awesome racing. The past few years, though, even with the Gen 6 car, just wasn't a huge fan of the track. This race, I will say, seeing that the tires actually mattered and that these drivers were fighting for their lives earlier in the race to try to hang on to these cars with literally like no rear grip, that was fun to watch. I also think there is something to be said about the dominance of SVG that can be fun to watch as well. But the thing that really drew me into this race and the thing I honestly spent the most time on was dissecting the Ty Gibbs pit road incident, because otherwise nothing truly was going on in the race. Yes, you saw drivers like Chase Elliott able to kind of work his way through the field as he was managing his tires, and that was great to see. You did see some interesting kind of battles out there, or near battles, with William Byron being able to kind of stay on the heels of SVG towards the middle of the race, trying to get the race lead, but ultimately not being able to make anything happen. You saw drivers kind of, again, fighting for their lives with their rear tires, just not doing what they needed them to do. It was fun, but it didn't draw me in. I hate to do this. This race is not below the yellow line, but I'm going to give it a 57%, just above the yellow line there. Again, nothing against the track itself. I just wish the product was a little better. But what did you think of the race at Sonoma? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, make sure to go to AboveTheYellowLine.com to learn more about our content, our partners, and what we do, also linked in the description. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Above the Yellow Line, and until next time, I'll see ya. Bye.